The Marvel vs. Capcom series is one of the most renowned crossovers in gaming history. Titles such as X-Men vs. Street Fighter, Marvel's Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, and Marvel vs. Capcom A Clash of the Superheroes each introduced unique elements to the genre. However, it was actually the next big installment, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, that would go down in history as one of the greatest fighting games ever created. Considering this and the fact that I just so happen to feel like cosplaying as Morrigan again, today is an excellent opportunity to revisit this classic title and explore why it is so highly celebrated and fondly remembered. We'll look at what sets this game apart to see what makes it one of the most beloved 2D fighters of all time. Let's delve into this and uncover the elements that contribute to the game's enduring greatness. I am Lady Decade, and this is Marvel vs. Capcom 2, the ultimate dream game. Marvel vs. Capcom 2, The New Age of Heroes, a game widely regarded as the pinnacle of the Marvel and Capcom collaborations. The creation of such a refined game was made possible by the exceptional foundation laid by its predecessors. At the recent Nintendo Direct, it was announced that Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics would be coming, a compilation that includes several beloved titles from the franchise. This collection aims to bring the magic of these classic arcade games to modern platforms, allowing both new and veteran players to experience the nostalgia and excitement of the original releases. The collection includes games like Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, and of course, Marvel vs. Capcom 2, among others. Each game has been optimized for modern consoles, featuring enhanced graphics, improved loading times, and online play capabilities. This re-release provides an excellent opportunity for players to revisit these classics or discover them for the first time. Speaking of this awesome selection of games that are coming, if you are looking for cheap thrills, Capcom already has some amazing game collections available for modern hardware. The Capcom Fighting Collection, containing all the Darkstalkers games, Red Earth, and much more, can be yours for just $16.33. That's 63% cheaper than on Steam. Or how about the Mega Man Legacy Collection for less than $2? And equally impressive reductions off of the huge Mega Man X Legacy collections of Zero ZX compilations. I'll provide links to all of these down below, ensuring that you get the best deals possible. Now, we just have to wait for Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection to come out. With this new collection, Capcom is ensuring that the legacy of these iconic fighting games continues to thrive. It highlights the game's continued relevance and popularity, proving that its chaotic fun and innovative mechanics still resonate with players today. Capcom's Marvel fighting games featuring aerial combat first appeared in the groundbreaking X-Men Children of the Atom and resurfaced shortly after in the aptly named Marvel Superheroes fighting game. Following this, we saw the incredible X-Men vs. Street Fighter, which introduced tag team mechanics and combined Capcom and Marvel rosters. This concept was then expanded to include more superheroes in Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter and even more Capcom characters in Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes. By this point, it seemed as though the company had reached the peak of what could be achieved with this crossover formula, leaving many to wonder if anything more impressive could be done. Well, those doubting Toms were proven wrong when Marvel vs. Capcom 2 debuted in arcades early in the year 2000, more than 2 years after the previous installment in the series.
How about that, Mr. Doubting Mustafa?
This 2-year hiatus was the longest gap between releases, as the first 3 Capcom vs. games were released just months apart. This extended break allowed Capcom to build anticipation and, more importantly, make changes to the formula to make it more broadly appealing than ever. But before delving deeper into this game, let's take a moment to consider what was likely many players' first glimpse of it: the arcade intro sequence. This introduction was designed to get gamers excited and eager to insert their coins, so let's take a look at what set the stage for this excitement to come.
Ready? of heroes.
So, as you can clearly see, instead of showcasing a lot of fighting scenes as in previous introductions, it looks like Capcom seemed to believe that the brand was strong enough to take a different approach. Therefore, rather than immediately displaying gameplay, the intro instead highlighted the impressive new features and mechanics that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 introduced. This included unveiling an extraordinarily large lineup of fighters in a stylish and bougie sequence. However, there was far more charm included with this entry than simply just this. Looking back to the earlier games, while there were minor mechanical differences between them, the most notable changes were in the character rosters. Each of the 3 titles featured fewer than 20 playable characters with different lineups based on the game's theme. Therefore, the next installment needed to be something bigger and more spectacular than ever before. I think that the obvious move for Capcom might have been to make Marvel vs. Capcom 2 a polygonal fighting game, but thankfully, the company chose instead to create an exquisitely refined sprite-based fighter, which was a delightful decision. However, unlike their previous efforts, this time the backgrounds and visual effects in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 were rendered in 3D, giving the game a unique look compared to its predecessors. This made it the first in the franchise to feature a 2.5D graphical style, and it was absolutely stunning. Before diving into the extensive mechanical changes and modes that this epic game introduced, let's talk about the roster, which, in my opinion, is one of the most remarkable aspects of this game. In fact, it might be one of the most incredible achievements in gaming history. The selection of fighters in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is astounding. At the start of the game, you can choose from 24 characters, but there are an additional 32 to unlock, bringing the total roster to an impressive 56 characters. This vast selection was almost unheard of in other fighting games, offering a level of variety that bordered on sheer madness. But it was a kind of madness that I certainly appreciated. This game's exciting roster features the return of most characters from previous Capcom vs. games, along with characters who hadn't been seen in fighting games since X-Men Children of the Atom and Marvel superheroes. Notable examples include Psylocke and Iron Man, who make a welcome return. However, this impressive lineup was just the tip of the iceberg, as the game also introduced a host of completely new characters. So let's talk about some of these new characters. First, we have Amingo, a character who has never appeared in games outside the Capcom vs. series. Amingo is a sentient cactus-human hybrid with a large, rotund belly dressed in Mexican apparel and carrying a guitar. Like a Pokemon, he only communicates by repeating his own name. Amingo has an arsenal of unique attacks at his disposal, including a special move known as the Shout of the Wind, which involves him turning himself into a ball to hurl at opponents. Ridiculous! Rumours suggested that he might be a rejected Darkstalkers character, while other sources claim his game was cancelled. Regardless of his origins, he is an appreciated oddity. Additionally, without a game to call her own, we have Ruby Heart, a French-speaking pirate captain renowned for her exploits on the high seas. Believe it or not, she was created as one of this title's main protagonists, playing a major role in its crazy story. While a story might seem unnecessary for a game like this, Ruby Heart is central to it. According to the game's plot, Ruby Heart is a treasure hunter with a fiery reputation known throughout the Seven Seas. Along with her crew on the flying ship named Partenaire, they constantly search for valuable items to add to her collection. Ruby Heart boasts numerous unique attacks, including summoning her ship to ram opponents and shoot cannonballs at them. Another wild combo includes her crew dropping a barrel on an opponent's head, allowing her to throw blades at their trapped bodies. This attack is a nod to the popular children's board game Pop-Up Pirate, which, like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, is also a Japanese creation. As for this intriguing character, Capcom's former community manager Seth Killian has revealed that she was originally a rejected concept for the Darkstalkers series, a fact later confirmed by Street Fighter producer Yoshinori Ono. Inclusions like Ruby Heart definitely add to the off-the-wall charm of Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Speaking of Darkstalkers, Morrigan makes her return to the Versus franchise, but this time she is joined by Anna Karis, Baby Bonnie Hood and Felicia. Their inclusion enhances Darkstalkers' prominence within the Capcom Versus series. Mega Man and Roll return as well, but this time they are joined by characters from the Mega Man Legends series, which was still relevant around the game's release. From the Mega Man universe, the new additions to the roster include Tron Bonne, the anti-hero member of the Bonne family of air pirates, who had previously starred in her own Capcom game titled The Misadventures of Tron Bonne. Joining her is a Servbot, one of the many all-purpose support robots that Tron Bonne built in the Legends series. Regarding the more unconventional additions, one of the most surprising characters is Sun Sun. Although she was created specifically for Marvel vs. Capcom 2, she has a connection to another Capcom game. This small monkey girl is portrayed as the daughter of the original Sun Sun, a male character from the 1984 arcade game of the same name. The 2D side-scrolling platformer, similar to Dragon Ball, is loosely based on the Chinese novel Journey to the West. Including such a quirky character in the game was indeed a surprise, to be sure, but a welcome one. Finally, among the new playable characters we have Jill Valentine, whose inclusion is no surprise given the massive success of Resident Evil during the 90s. Her depiction in an anime art style in this game is a refreshing change from her previous appearances, making her one of my favourite additions to the Marvel vs. Capcom roster. Now that we've covered many of the new fighters, let's delve into the development of this expansive game. As mentioned in previous discussions, all the prior Versus games were programmed to run on Capcom System 2 arcade boards, the same hardware used for the Street Fighter Alpha series in arcades. However, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was developed for entirely different hardware. In fact, this was the first fighting game that Capcom developed independently without utilising their own arcade boards. Instead, the game was created to run on the Sega Naomi arcade board, which used the same electronic components as the Sega Dreamcast. The Naomi had twice as much system memory, twice as much video memory, and 4 times as much sound memory as its home console counterpart, making it the perfect hardware for a game intended to be ported to the powerful Sega home console. The game was first announced on the 1st of December 1999, and on that same day it was revealed that the Japanese home and arcade versions would be compatible via the Dreamcast VMU. This feature allowed players to exchange data between the two versions, earning experience points that could be used to unlock characters, stages, and costumes. Because after all, who doesn't love costumes? If you like costumes too, you can access my behind the scenes cosplay content and back the channel so that I can buy more via visiting my Patreon page. Thank you very much. On that same day, it was also announced that the game would feature online play for Dreamcast players through a network known as a matching service. However, due to technical limitations, this feature was removed from all international ports of the Dreamcast game. Thanks to the technical similarities between the Naomi and the Dreamcast, it only took a few months for the game's arcade version to be ported to homes in Japan by March of the year 2000. Fortunately, the title was released worldwide by the summer of that same year, allowing players around the globe to enjoy this absolute classic. Now that we've covered the exciting roster and the hardware this game runs on, let's delve into the gameplay mechanics found in Marvel vs. Capcom 2 New Age of Heroes. This installment brings back tag team fighting, but with a significant twist. This time the play modes offer gamers more choice than ever before. Instead of simply picking 2 fighters for tag team action, players can now choose 3 characters to face off against teams of opponents in 3-on-3 combat. This change instantly gives a practical purpose to the game's massive roster of fighters. How impressive. As in previous games, if a damaged character tags out, they can slowly regenerate health while not in play, adding a strategic layer to the madness. Building on this, the variable system also makes a return, but is even more refined this time around. The variable system mechanic, first introduced in Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, allows players to call upon their off-screen teammates to join their current character in performing a single special move. This feature adds an extra layer of strategy and excitement to the gameplay. Each character also has 3 assist moves ranging from projectile attacks to healing techniques. The hyper combo gauge returns, gradually filling as players deal and receive damage. Once full, characters can use this power to perform hyper combos that inflict heavy damage. The meter also allows for delayed combos, executing multiple hyper combos simultaneously and variable combinations, enabling all 3 characters to perform hyper combos at once. Absolute mayhem. Other mechanical changes include the snapback move, which forces opponents to switch characters. The game's controls have also been modified, shifting from 6 attack buttons to 4 attack buttons and 2 assist buttons, making the game more accessible to casual players. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 features both single and multiplayer modes, typical for arcade fighters of the era. In arcade modes, players fight through various encounters until reaching the final boss. To face the main villain, players must first defeat 7 teams of 3. The final boss is against Abyss, who, in typical final boss fashion, has 3 different forms that you must defeat. These 3 forms allow the 3-on-3 playstyle of the game to persist throughout the battle. Abyss is a character created specifically for the game. He is a legendary creature forgotten by time and believed to be merely a fairy tale. According to the game's lore, Abyss is a forbidden weapon sealed away in an underground temple, where it has been in a deep sleep for centuries. Ruby Heart accidentally awakened Abyss, prompting her to transport the Capcom and Marvel fighters via her airship to help stop him. If the game's arcade mode isn't enough for you and you want to hone your skills, the title also offers a training mode. This allows players to practice moves and combos without being in direct competitive combat. Additionally, there is a score attack mode similar to arcade mode, but the primary objective is to achieve the highest score possible without needing a continue. The original arcade game also features an experience system, providing players with an incentive to unlock hidden characters. However, the Dreamcast version replaces this with what is known as the Secret Factor menu. In this menu, players can browse and purchase characters, costumes and stages using points earned throughout their playthrough. This feature gives the game a level of single-player replayability that is arguably higher than previous entries in the Capcom vs series or any prior Street Fighter games. Who doesn't love the amount of content this game includes? The quest for unlockables serves as a great incentive for players to keep coming back, wondering what else the game has to offer. It's also a tempting prospect for completionists who enjoy trying to attain everything within a game. To me, this kind of feature should be in every game, not just fighters, as it provides an easy incentive and a rewarding experience to keep going. Unfortunately, most developers today prefer to put additional content behind paywalls, making unlockables attained through skill or resilience a dying feature. But if you enjoyed this sort of challenge, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the Dreamcast delivers it in spades. Now that we've reviewed the game and its many features, let's see what journalists and critics thought of it upon release. Did they enjoy the game as much as many people do today, or were opinions different back then? Let's find out. GameSpot reviewed the game favourably, stating, "The over-the-top nature of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 makes the other Versus games look subdued by comparison. Like its predecessor, it isn't the most balanced game in the world, but that doesn't keep it from being a great deal of fun. Fans of the off-kilter action found in the previous Versus games will surely be pleased with Marvel vs. Capcom 2, as it represents the first major set of changes this series has ever seen." IGN would heap praise on the title too, stating, "Capcom sets a new watermark in the Versus series of fighters. All fighting fans must have this game. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 proves to be one of the best fighting games out there, one of the Dreamcast's most sparkling gems, and an awesome experience." Other publications continue to heap praise on the game. The Daily Radar proclaimed it to be the most fun 2D fighter of all time, while Hot Games echoed this sentiment, stating, "It's the best 2D fighting game ever made." After examining these game reviews from over 20 years ago, it's clear that the consensus amongst journalists was that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 was one of the greatest 2D fighting games ever made, even if it didn't take itself as seriously as many others in the genre. Fast forward to 2002 and the Sega Dreamcast was discontinued. Sega officially announced its retirement from the hardware industry, meaning future Capcom games would no longer appear on Sega systems. This was a significant loss, considering that previous versions of their fighting games on Sega platforms had been among the best for quite some time. RIP Sega hardware, how we miss ye. As a result, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 received 2 new ports, one for the PlayStation 2 and another for the Microsoft Xbox, both announced at the Electronic Entertainment Expo in 2002. However, similar to the Dreamcast version, online support for these ports remained exclusive to Japan, despite being 2 years removed from the game's initial release. GameSpot once again covered the release, stating, "The game had been perfectly translated for new consoles," but also commented that the game's graphics and art style were nowhere near as impressive looking as they were 2 years prior, saying, "The contrast between 2D and 3D doesn't work quite as well as you might like, and the resulting clash makes for sharp looking backgrounds and relatively pixelated character sprites." Which, to be fair to GameSpot, is a fair point, as a strong case could be made that the whole game may have aged even better if it was all in simple 2D. I must admit though, I still quite enjoy these graphical effects. Although GameSpot still reviewed the game favourably, they no longer considered it one of the greatest 2D fighters ever. They even went so far as to state that it has been surpassed on nearly every front since its original release. Games like Guilty Gear X have shown freshly animated, impressively sharp 2D sprites, and Capcom's later releases like Capcom vs SNK 2 are simply better games in almost every imaginable way. With regards to the 2002 release, they would summarise with, "If you're a hardcore fan of Marvel vs. Capcom 2 yet somehow missed the Dreamcast version when it was originally released, this game is a port you will definitely enjoy, but anyone else can find better fighting games on the market." IGN praised the game similarly to the review 2 years earlier, but they were sorely disappointed by the lack of online play in the Western releases. This absence was particularly painful considering the rise of Xbox Live. They also criticised the load times compared to the Dreamcast version. Interestingly, unlike GameSpot, IGN stated that the game even beats out the later released Capcom vs SNK franchise, highlighting the subjectivity of reviews and the importance of forming our own judgments about games. The game reappeared on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 in the next generation. This happens primarily because Backbone Entertainment had developed Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo HD Remix for these systems in 2008, which led to many people playing competitively online. Following this success, fans requested that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 be released on these platforms with online play functionality. After all, many believed that such a game was a backbone of 2D fighting game entertainment. Consequently, the game was re-released utilising the original Dreamcast version's code, known for being the most refined home version. In addition to online play, this version featured various filter options for character sprites, providing smooth, crisp and classic looks, as well as widescreen support. These versions were available for online purchase until 2013, when Capcom announced that Marvel vs. Capcom 2 would be removed from Xbox Live Arcade and PlayStation Network stores due to the expiration of their licensing contract with Marvel Comics. Over the years, the game has remained popular and is now considered one of the most iconic fighting games ever. Since its release, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 has consistently been featured in fighting game tournaments, but despite its popularity, is it truly one of the greatest fighters ever? To reiterate a point I made earlier, this question can only be answered subjectively, even when we use specific criteria to help reach a conclusion. But for the sake of entertainment, here are my personal thoughts on the matter. I certainly think it's amazing. The roster is massive, the 3-on-3 mechanic was innovative, and the simplified controls made the game accessible to players of all skill levels. Additionally, the plethora of unlockables gives this game immense replay value for those who enjoy a single-player completionist experience. In many ways, this fighting game offered more than any before it. Some criticised the game for being unbalanced, however the Versus series is not about balance. It's about chaos and fun, which this game delivers in abundance. It caters to different tastes, but I can see why many people would enjoy this game more than others. This title feels enormous. When you combine all the elements that make Marvel vs. Capcom 2 great, you understand why it is considered an ultimate dream game. No Capcom crossover game has brought this level of insanity since, which is why so many people are rejoicing that it's now coming to modern hardware as a part of the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection. Now, don't forget, I can get to you up to 90% off thousands of games using my affiliate links, including the Capcom Fighting Collection and some of the amazing Mega Man compilations. Each purchase goes a long way in supporting this channel. However, if you want to support my work in a more personal way and directly fund my cosplay costumes, back the show on Patreon and receive behind the scenes photos and more as a reward. See you soon.